Welcome to Conversations with Cacao. I am your host, Alexandra Gabrielle, and today we get to travel to Austria, where we meet Roman of Cao Bali. He introduces to us the beautiful Balinese cacao that he works with and supplies, and with him we explore a conversation around permaculture, interconnectivity of spirit and science and the earth. I hope you enjoy. So, welcoming ourselves into the space and beginning to breathe. Finding yourself, finding your center, maybe moving from the mind. I feel my nerves also swirling, so just allowing that to begin to settle. And finding that space within us that is just that sea of calm. Beginning to breathe from that space. Finding any tension in our shoulders, in our body, and allowing more of that water to flow through. That easiness to breathe through as we come deeper and deeper into this moment. Coming deeper into the present to share in a good way. And finding that point where we begin to co-create, where the magic that lives within us becomes a bridge to the outer world, where the clarity that we speak just flows with ease. And allowing that essence of who we are beginning to anchor and find its roots through our feet down into Mother Earth, flowing all the way down to the heart of Mother Earth. And feeling our connection to our planet that we are currently spinning on. Wherever we are on the earth, we are still on this planet. We are still connected. And we can still find our roots planted here, and allowing the energy, just opening up our imagination to receive as if this beautiful being were filling us with light too, filling us with love, filling us with this joy of welcome. Thank you for being on this planet. Thank you for co-creating with me. And thank you for seeing the magic that is here. And allowing her energy to begin to flow up our feet, our legs, our root, into our sacral, our solar plexus, all the way into our heart. And then allowing our spine to elongate, raising our chin, our head, the crown of our crown up to the heart of the sky, opening up to the wisdom of the sky, the wisdom of the sun, the wisdom of the moon, the stars, and opening up to more of our own wisdom. And allowing that energy to begin to flow, feeling the connection from above and below as we bring this energy in through our brain, in through our throat, our shoulders, activating our hands, activating our heart, and flowing through our legs. And once again, finding ourselves in the center. But now maybe we feel a little bit more supported. Maybe there's a space that we feel a little bit more connected, a little bit more expansive. And breathing into that space. Again, allowing for the softness and fluidity in the body, the softness and fluidity in the words, in our mind, in our heart. And as we begin to pour our love into our cup of cacao, as we bless this beautiful, beautiful fruit, and very gently bringing the cup of cacao into our hands, as we fill our cup with gratitude, giving thanks to the heart of the earth. We give thanks to the heart of the sky. We give thanks to the heart of the waters, and we give thanks to the heart of the fire. We give thanks to the heart of the air, and we give thanks to the four winds that we breathe, the four directions that hold us in every moment, to the north, to the south, to the east, and to the west. We give thanks to all of the energies within existence, all of the energies that ever were, and all of the energies that ever will be. We give thanks to the energy of ether, and we give thanks to the energy of the void. We give thanks to the guardians and protectors of our lands on which we currently reside, and the guardians and protectors of the lands from which our cacao has traveled, blessing these beings, the animals, the people who made the cultivation of this fruit possible, and just seeing how our connection, our love for them ripples out like a wave into the world, filling their lives with love, filling their roots with love, and how that embodies itself within their families and comes back right to us and our family. We give thanks to our maternal lineage, and we give thanks to our paternal lineage. We give thanks to all of the energies that be, that support us in every moment, in the physical realm, in the non-physical, in our dreams. And we give thanks to the power of word, the power of spoken word and communication, this technology that we are meeting upon, where ancient technology meets modern technology. And may all that we speak to our highest good come through us with love as we give thanks to the heart of Mama Cacao, blessing this beautiful energy that supports us in our daily life, that co-creates and weaves these beautiful people together all across the world, opening our hearts, that we may find ourselves present in ourselves, creating beauty. And so it is. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah. I'm not sure. Do you have a cup of cacao with you too?
Was just thinking about that. I had mine before. Maybe I should have waited.
It's all good. I'm going to take my first sip. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here, be present, have this conversation. Right now, I have the honor of sitting here with Roman from Cao Bali, and you are currently in Austria and the Wörthersee, right? Yeah. And I have a little bit of connection there, but I would love to hear more about you, more about your story, and how cacao found you, and how you find yourself in this present moment.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for this lovely opening ceremony. I don't think I've ever done that before, a conversation before, but I will integrate it now. It really does make a difference, I think. So thank you for that. And yeah, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk about my passion, which is still cacao, even after 4 years. And yeah, should I just get started with my
Yeah,
story, or is there anything?
sure.
Well, I think the best way to describe it is my personal story to it, because I think a lot of people will be able to relate to that, and maybe you have a similar story as well, because my connection to cacao actually started. Well, the first connection I had to cacao is the same as everyone, right? With chocolate, when you're a little kid and you like to eat chocolate, and everybody tells you, well, chocolate makes you happy, you know? And then you're like, oh, well, when I eat chocolate, I really am happy, but you never really think about it. And then at some point in my life, and most people I think share the same, I had contact with ceremonial cacao. And the first time I ever had a ceremonial cacao at a cacao ceremony, I think I can speak for everyone. It just blows you away because you don't expect anything from it, right? You think, oh, this is gonna be probably a fancy hot chocolate. This is probably gonna be the same thing that I drank as a kid, and yeah, people are singing mantras and everything. Yeah, it's probably some spiritual. And then you drink the cacao, and suddenly something hits you that you're not expecting. Like you never expected cacao to actually be that. Able to overtake you in that way, or to show you something that intense, because for me the connection to cacao was always that it's just something to enjoy. But after my first cacao ceremony, I noticed, okay, this is just more. This is actual medicine. This is actually something that can teach you something. And this is also something that's very hard to explain to people who never had a cacao ceremony, who never had ceremonial cacao, because I remember when I started 4 years ago, at this point, it's almost 5 years ago, ceremonial cacao was not as popular in Europe as it is now. So we have to think this was before COVID. So it was like 2019. And yeah, at that time, if I would be telling people here in Europe about cacao ceremonies, I think maybe one person out of 100 would understand what I'm talking about. But luckily now, and it's getting even more popular, a lot of people have heard about cacao ceremonies. A lot of people have reached the point where they want to try it themselves. A lot of people have tried it a lot of times. I'm pretty sure a lot of people listening, there's either those who've done it one time or who've been working with cacao, who've done regular cacao ceremonies, those who think it's something exciting but haven't tried it yet. So I was the same 4 or 5 years ago. But to me, this first contact with cacao was just so incredible. It was just so overtaking that I knew I came to the conclusion during the ceremony, but especially after the ceremony, I thought I need to bring this to Europe, because if this medicine has the power to connect to me in a way that I wasn't even aware that anything can connect to me, then I'm pretty sure it can do the same thing for a lot of people where I come from. And especially here in Austria, the connection we have to cacao is definitely not the same that at the time I was in Bali. So not the same connection that people there had to it. Like here in Austria, hot chocolate is something you drink in winter. You put maybe an ounce of cacao and then 5 ounces of sugar in it. And that's that. And I kind of wanted to change that, because I saw cacao as a huge potential to connect to people who are not easy to reach, like myself. I wasn't really open to meditation at the time. I wasn't really open to breath work, to yoga, whatever. To me, it was all inaccessible. And same as cacao ceremonies, it wasn't really accessible to me. But when I went to a cacao ceremony and I had this ceremonial cacao for the first time, it was like, I always say, like, because people say it's heart opening. For me, it was more like it exploded, like everything just burst open. And yeah, that sums it up pretty much. So ever since then, it's been my passion, because because of what it did for me, how it helped me, not only from that perspective, but also from a nutrition perspective. But the other big motivation is that I can see how it can help a lot of people, and I see how it's a very gentle way to help people. And it's a very accessible, I should say, way to help people, because most people will be open to, do you want to try a ceremonial cacao? It's raw cacao, it's pure cacao. I haven't met anyone yet who says, no, definitely not. Stay away from me. So yeah, that's basically how I got to cacao, and everything from there is just, I think, my story of how I started to work with cacao, how I tried to spread it in Europe, how I was taking part in the journey of cacao, because I saw that cacao was making its way throughout the world. People say that cacao travels around the world when it's needed, and I think right now is the best example, because for the last couple of years, I see it everywhere, and I'm very happy to be part of that.
Yes, yes to so many things you just shared. I am curious about how you wound up in Bali, if there was a little bit of like this rub against meditation and yoga. So, how did you actually find yourself there initially?
And that's also a coincidence where I say, is it a coincidence? I'm not sure, but that was 2019 actually. A friend of mine just invited me to come with him because he had a spare ticket, because, long story, he broke up with his girlfriend. So I came along there by accident, and I was very surprised by the nature that people in Bali show. So not just the people from foreign countries, but especially the Balinese people, like the mentality they had, the way they interact with each other was just completely different to what I was used from, not just European countries, but from any other country. So that was something that really spoke to me. And then I noticed that Balinese people are very, very spiritual. So if you've been to Bali before, you probably know what I mean. They have a ceremony every single day. They have street parades with the gods they're worshipping pretty much every week. They have the silent day, which is a day that's dedicated to absolute silence. It's the only place in the world that has a silent day where there's absolutely no sound, no internet, no airplanes, nothing. So these people, they're very, very dedicated to spirituality, to not thinking only about themselves, but the collective. If you speak to a Balinese person, sometimes they would phrase things about like how we do the things, where a Western person would say I. So even in their vocabulary, it was this connection. So because of that, I was drawn more towards it, because I saw that spirituality, that meditation actually, it actually works in a place like this, that people have it as their everyday life mantra. And in this, it's hard to describe, but the island of Bali itself is called Island of Gods. And if you spend a few weeks there, something changes. It's simply because the interaction you have with not just the locals, but also with the people who are visiting there. It's just the whole way people interact changes. And I think that made me more open, thankfully, to cacao ceremony. Probably also explains why this was such a intense cacao ceremony for me, because the first cacao ceremony was in Bali on the Island of Gods, surrounded by the wild jungle, surrounded by the Balinese gods. I think everything just fell into place, really.
Wow. I'm soaking in the imagery of that moment and the transformation. It's almost, I like to work in metaphors. So we have the seed, and then in order for the seed to actually produce fruit, it needs the correct environment. It needs the warmth and the water and the soils and the light for it to begin to release its husk. And it kind of like, for me, it was like, oh, the environment was like cocooning you, enabled for you to be able to just like soften just enough to allow cacao in.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it. I like that.
And the contrast of like cultures, of how one place just develops and integrates these thoughts. Well, it's a very simple concept, but we have all these countries in the world that have their own thoughts, they have their own culture, they have their own way of being. And I noticed that, I have a daughter, she's 10, and I send her to the Waldorf school, and it's a very different culture there. And the way that she's growing up is seeing that certain things are normal, whereas in public school, these wouldn't be normal. We wouldn't be just doing handwork and crocheting, and the boys wouldn't just be knitting. And there are certain things that, when it's culturally accepted, it just levels the playing field, because, oh yeah, of course, this is just how it is. And it goes the same way, for the way that we guard our hearts and the way that we approach one another. And I know that, from growing up in Austria as well, sometimes there's a little bit of distance and the acceptance of certain ideas. It's like you have to really work sometimes to allow those connections to flourish in certain countries that I've been to, where it's like, oh no, this is just, come, you're family, you're welcome, you're loved, just in that embrace. I'm not sure where I'm really going with it. Just
No,
things that
it's
came up as
actually,
you were speaking.
it's funny that you described it this way, because this is a thought that I had about when I was talking about the cacao ceremony and the ceremonial cacao, I think, and when you mentioned about the seed needing the right environment to grow, similar to ceremonial cacao, because as I said before, everybody has had cacao before, but very few people had pure cacao before. So that's one environment that needs to be met for cacao to do its magic, to open the heart, right? The other requirement would be, for example, setting the right place, like what you did before at the beginning of this podcast. If you really set the right intention, or if you have the cacao ideally at a cacao ceremony, or if you make your own cacao ceremony, or you don't even need a ceremony, but if you really just set the right place, set the right environment, the right setting, these are the environments that are needed. So this is actually a very beautiful metaphor, because it just goes to show you, like, for same as for cacao, as for your daughters, for me in Bali, the environment just plays such an important role. I mean, we both grew up in Austria, so we both probably had the culture shock of leaving Austria for the first time and noticing different cultures, people engaging in different ways. And I had that when I first went to New Zealand. I came back, but then I had another one when I came to Bali, right, where there's like, just as I said before, no no me, no you, just the us. The changing environment is a really huge factor in changing in yourself. So
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You sparked my curiosity when you said also New Zealand. That's a place I've been wanting to get to as well. I'm curious about any other cacao that you've worked with. If you've noticed any different energies within the different cacao in your
uh,
travels.
definitely, yeah. So I'm not sure if there is cacao from New Zealand. I haven't encountered any yet. I was thinking why you said it, if there's a possibility to grow cacao in New Zealand. I'm not sure. I've experienced cacao from Africa, of course, then from Indonesia. So not just Bali, but also the other islands like Borneo, Papua New Guinea, Sumatra, Sulawesi. There's a lot of islands in Indonesia. And of course, the South American cacao, which is, I think, the most popular still in Europe. So from either Peru or, yeah, generally South America. I think there's a lot of. I think there's even some Mexican cacao. But in general, my experiences and the reason that I chose to also work with the Balinese cacao, because after my interest was spiked, there's actually also South American cacao available in Bali, and there's also African cacao available in Bali. And I've tried these, and they all have their different application. And from the years that I've been working with cacao, working with people that use cacao, facilitators, I've found out that everybody has their different preferences when it comes to cacao, when it comes to what they expect from the cacao. The Balinese one for me, it's just, if I had to describe it with one word, it's just a childish cacao. You know, it's heartwarming, it's playful, it's joyful. The way it can help you is almost as if it were talking to your inner child and kind of connecting to you that way, which is what really resonated with me. For South American cacao, for example, I don't know if that's maybe my view of the area in general, but I always feel like it has this passion, it has this fire, it has this energy, can sometimes be even a bit too much energetic to a point where you cannot sit still at a ceremony anymore. You have to do something, you have to dance. It's usually when I at a cacao ceremony with like South American cacao, people are always dancing, like they always get up and they dance. If it's the Balinese cacao, they're usually like at their place, or they meet other people, or they start to hug each other. So it's a very, very different energy. And this is something that I also noticed when I was talking to a facilitator of mine. I gave him one of my new strains of ceremonial cacao. He tried it and he immediately told me, "Is this grown next to a lake?" And I was like, how does he know? I didn't tell him, but really the farm is right next to a lake. So it's a permaculture farm. And that was another very, very big example, sign for me that there's definitely some differences people can feel. And if you're very, very sensitive, you can even feel the little differences. I wouldn't say I'm a very sensitive person, but I can definitely feel the difference between South American cacao, Indonesian cacao, also African cacao, which is somewhere in the middle for me between Indonesia, between Balinese cacao and South American.
Tasting the lake or feeling the energy
Yeah,
of
I
the
was
lake.
very happy when you told me that. I was surprised, confused, but also happy when you said that.
I feel like this is a beautiful gateway into sharing about where your cacao comes from and the farm. If you'd like to share and illustrate
Sure,
that a
sure.
little bit for us.
This is one of the other reasons why I chose to work with this cacao, because I like, my background is that I was studying environmental studies, and I was very much into sustainability and sustainable agriculture, circular economy. I think that's in English. Yeah. So in general, I was very much interested in that, and that also led to permaculture. If you're familiar with the term, permaculture, for those who don't know, is basically a way of agriculture that's going a little bit further than just organic agriculture. So permaculture means that you only use whatever you have available in the space of the farm. So if you have a huge cacao farm, like in my case, for example, you would only use fertilizers which are grown on the same farm. So ideally, you have a lot of different crops, you have a lot of different animals, there's a few requirements for permaculture farm, like the biodiversity is a huge part. The fact that you don't just grow crops, but also grow vegetation that is not beneficial for consumption. So in general, I like to describe it as just a natural forest that's not altered in any way. That's already a permaculture if it produces anything that's edible. And that's basically very, very easy in Bali because it's basically a jungle. So everything just grows all year round. And the farmers there, they don't have to do anything in particular to make their farm a permaculture farm. They actually have to do less because they just don't need to cut anything out. They just have their area, their agricultural space, their forest. They plant a few cacao trees, and they leave the rest be as it is. So they use like ants as pesticides, banana leaves as fertilizer. And this is very, very sustainable because you don't change anything. You just add a few trees. And because I had a huge interest in that, I knew that if I want to bring cacao to Europe, I want it to be as sustainable as possible. Yeah, it's very, very easy in Bali. It's also easy in South America. I just happen to prefer the Balinese cacao. That's basically all there is to say about the cacao farms. So they're all permaculture farms. They're all very, very small scale. The farmers, they all own their land. They make their own prices. They don't have a cooperative around them. It's basically, think about just 20, 30, 40 farmers who have their own forest, who grow cacao trees and who sell it to whoever they want to. Because I think that's the most healthy kind of agriculture. It's just small scale production, but in the small scale production, you have a very high quality, a very high value. Of course, these farms don't produce as much as a monoculture farm. They don't produce as much as even an organic farm because in order for it to be still permaculture, you need to have all the other trees. But in Bali, that doesn't make a difference because the farmers, they don't just grow cacao, they grow bananas, they grow coconuts, they grow, well, literally anything that grows there. I've been to 100 farms. Every farm looks different. They all have different kind of crops they're growing. But yeah, that's basically the idea. So for me, it really, the fact that it's a small scale production, the fact that it's the same cacao that has been growing there, wild growing there for hundreds of years is what spoke to me. The other aspect that really spoke to me about cacao is the nutritional value. So the two important parts for me is one, that the farm is sustainable, and two, that the cacao has the highest amount of nutrients possible, which of course is when it's grown naturally, grown the way that it's intended to grow, not altered by pesticides or fertilizers.
Would you like to talk a little bit more about the nutrients that cacao provides and has provided for you in your life?
Yeah, that's definitely the big part of my passion about cacao is the nutrition value. Well, the first part is the most important ingredient I would say about cacao is, when it comes to nutrition value, is magnesium, because I think a lot of people already know that cacao has a lot of magnesium. It's actually the fruit, however you can call it. In general, it has the highest magnesium content of any food available right now, which makes it, of course, ideal for vegans, for example, who have a hard time getting enough magnesium. Then it has other ingredients such as iron, calcium, a lot of different ingredients that would actually supplement the diet pretty well. You could technically survive by only eating cacao beans because they have a very good ratio in fat, carbohydrates, and protein as well. But they also bring a lot of minerals and other nutrition with it. I've actually met people who've done cacao fasting, which basically means you just eat or drink cacao for a couple of weeks.
That's pretty much my diet. Sometimes intentionally.
Well, I mean, and you seem to be doing well with it, so it definitely speaks for the cacao. Because if you think about anything else, like coffee, for example, if your diet would consist of only coffee, you probably wouldn't be having a conversation with you right now. And that speaks for the cacao on its own, because it has this base of very, very rich nutrients. It doesn't really matter what kind of situation you're in, what you're trying to use cacao for. It will pretty much always benefit you. I haven't met many people who cannot eat or drink cacao. Actually, a fun side story, like a very good friend of mine who cannot eat sugar. She has a very, very unique condition where she just cannot eat any sugar. And till she met me, actually, she thought she can never drink cacao. She never thought about chocolate because she only knew the high concentrated chocolate, like the 90%, 95%, even that had too much sugar. I was actually the one to tell her, hey, you can actually drink cacao, pure cacao doesn't have sugar. So even for people with diabetes, even for people with certain allergies, pretty much everyone can consume cacao, which is another great fact for me because it's a high nutritious food. Everybody can consume it. And then there's the third aspect to it, which is the heart opening effect, which science is not sure where it comes from. What we can definitely say is cacao has a huge amount of theobromine. It has a very, very high content, and theobromine, for those who don't know, it's similar to caffeine. It's like on the caffeine, which is active in coffee, but it has a very, very different grasp to it. So it doesn't increase your cortisol spikes a lot like caffeine does. And for a lot of people, when they drink coffee, it goes like, and then half an hour later, it goes zoop. For cacao, you never really experience that. So even though the theobromine is similar to caffeine, it doesn't have the same effects. Then what cacao also has is tryptophan, which is, I hope I'm pronouncing that correct again, which is the substance that helps our body create, or it's basically the foundation of creating serotonin and dopamine, yeah, which are we call them happy hormones. So basically, cacao gives you the fuel, it gives you the raw materials for your body to produce serotonin and dopamine. So the raw materials to produce, what makes us happy, which also is a very, very interesting side effect for food. So we're still talking about something that has enough nutrition value to be considered a food, which is very, very unique. And there's this famous quote that I always love to cite when I talk about the value of cacao. It doesn't really work in English, but it's from Alexander from Humboldt, who said that, if you translate it to English, he said, no second time has nature put such a vast amount of nutrients in such a small space as it did in cacao beans. So kein zweites Mal hat die Natur eine solche Fülle der wertvollsten Nährstoffe auf einem so kleinen Raum zusammengedrängt, wie gerade bei der Kakaobohne.
Wow.
Yeah, sounds better in German, I promise.
Just sit with that. That's such a dense statement there to really think of how much nature compacted into in these tiny little beans. All of the wisdom, the nutrients, if you want to be a little woo about it, the multidimensional effects that it has on mind, body, and spirit into this plant. I know a little bit about him, but I didn't ever really know his connection to cacao.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't really speak a lot about cacao, but it seems to have been like one of his passions, and he seems to have known a little bit about it, which is interesting because that was a long time ago.
Yeah. I'm curious if you would like to explore more about how cacao trees grow, because I know the real ancient trees have such deep roots. They go down deep. And if that is in the realm of your knowledge.
One thing that immediately comes to my mind, because the question that I'm asked a lot when it comes to nutritious value of cacao is people ask me about the cadmium content of cacao. And people always say that cadmium is actually like toxic. Well, people don't say it is like that. Cadmium is a toxic heavy metal. And they always ask me, why is there so much cadmium in cacao beans? Why is there so many heavy metals? It's similar to hemp. If you think about hemp, the primary use of hemp before it was cultivated was to clean the earth, actually, because hemp has the ability to draw a lot of heavy metals, a lot of pollution, a lot of things out of the earth that are not supposed to be there, and use it to grow, use it as a fertilizer, which is a very, very beautiful concept to think about it, that how nature keeps everything in balance. If there's some kind of contamination. Well, of course, only to a certain degree. We cannot dump everything in the forest and expect trees to handle it. But if it's a natural contamination, like heavy metals, for example, things that come from the earth, nature has a way of dealing with it. And cacao trees actually are one way of nature to deal with heavy metals, because cacao trees, they really pull the cadmium out of the earth. It's a bigger problem in South America because there's more cadmium in the earth. So of course the cacao draws more cadmium out of it. So sometimes you have like 0.5 micrograms per kilogram, 0.8, which I think is the limit. Like above that, you shouldn't eat the cacao. In Bali or in Indonesia in general, because we also have farms in Kalimantan, there's a bit lower cadmium amount in the earth. So there's almost no cadmium. But still, when we test our cacao, it has like 0.14, 0.20, 0.30. When even if you test the earth there, it doesn't have that much cadmium. So that just goes to show you it just sucks the cadmium out of the earth. It sucks things out of the earth. And that's important because every plant has that for certain things. Like, for example, bananas, they suck, I forgot which one it was, but they suck another heavy metal out of the earth, which also can be a problem if there's a lot of it in that area. So every plant has its position, so to say, in the environment, and cacao is no different. To get back to the point where we said that cacao, that nature compressed so much nutrients into cacao, to me, that is because the cacao plant just has such a strong ability to draw out of the earth, to draw nutrients, to draw water, to draw, but because cacao trees also drink a lot, to draw everything out of the earth. And of course, that also goes with heavy metals. So I think cacao is just in general a very, very powerful plant. And of course, a very powerful plant will produce a very powerful fruit. And yeah, that's another thing we learned at the permaculture experiments, that cacao benefits other plants as well. So for example, in one of our farms, we have cacao, coconut, and banana, which if you think about it, the combination sounds pretty tasty, right? Cacao, coconut blossom sugar, banana, mix it all together, tropical smoothie.
Yeah.
But it turns out it's not just delicious. It turns out that these plants, if they grow next to each other, if they grow in the same environment, they help each other. There's almost no, not no insects, but no pests there. There's a lot of ants that protect the tree, that protect the fruits from possible pests. There's almost no sickness among the plants, like, for example, root sicknesses or leaf sicknesses. And you can see how they really adapt to each other. They kind of grow in a way that every plant has enough sunlight, that they have enough space, and it's a beautiful environment. And yeah, I think cacao plays a big role into that because it's just one of the other plants that actually work together in a huge harmony. And if you would take cacao, for example, out of the environment, we don't know what would happen because, yeah, it's a key part of the whole. But every plant is, right? Bananas, coconut, also the trees we don't use.
Really, really fascinating. Again, working in the levels of the physical realm, the scientific realm, the cacao tree pulls all of this, has the power to pull these deep heavy metals out of the earth. But when we use it in a spiritual capacity, she's also bringing this negredo that we have within us, the darkness that we don't wish to face, but giving us the nutrients to deal with it too. So I love that mirror on both sides where it's like, she taught me to ground down because I have a tendency to be very flighty and excited on all the ideas, but anchoring it down, grounding, being present, being embodied is some of the wisdom she taught me. But I love that next level of like actually on the physical level, she's pulling and doing all this work under the ground, working together in this really beautiful interconnection and communication with the other plants. And for me in my life, that's what she's also facilitated in me, of just interacting. We're here now, reaching out, talking to people all over the globe, and having these conversations. So thank you for bringing that in. It's really fascinating. And I hear about the different elders that I follow and listen, is that there are some parts where the earth is still asleep, and where I am, it's like the trees, they're asleep, and we need to wake them up. And I feel like having these conversations, it almost brings back the life that they need as well, of talking about the interconnection, talking about how trees talk to each other, talking about how the animals support each other, brings this life back to the earth. I read a lot of like novels and mythology stuff with my daughter. So, like, just bringing that element of myth back into the conversation, I feel like awakens that excitement, at least for me too, of like, oh yeah, of course, like, of course, everything's living. Of course, it's working together. Of course, they're communicating. And then adding that scientific level just kind of really anchors and affirms that for me. The ants keep on coming back. I was so curious about the ants. I don't know why, but I'm not sure
Well,
if there's something more to share there.
yeah, sure. But first of all, thank you for bringing that because that's the thing that I love when same as I said with my friend who felt the lake. I love it when people, or in general, when you can feel something, when something is obvious, when you're like, oh, I can explain this, but I cannot really explain it. And then there's also like actual science which confirms it. So I love it when it works together like that. Like what you said about the cacao, because to me it also feels like it's pulling not just the nutrients, it's pulling everything. So that explains why cacao from Bali gives you a Balinese feeling, because when I drink cacao from Bali, I feel like I'm in Bali. When I drink a cacao from South America, I feel like I'm dancing somewhere in Brazil. It really, like, to me, this ability for cacao to pull out of the earth is not just on a physical level. It just might also pull things out of the earth that we cannot really see, that we cannot measure, but it still pulls it. It's what people would call energy, or the spirit. So this is a lovely way to interconnect that, to interconnect what we can actually measure and what we can feel. And it kind of talks about the same thing. The ants. um, this is actually something that I can advise anyone who's doing gardening, who's having problems with any kind of pests in their garden, or whatever, even if it's like agriculture. There will always be, for every pest, there will also be something like a counter pest or an insect that fights off what you're trying to fight off. So, for example, if you have, how's this one called? The little bugs that have like a shield on the Schildläuse. But there's many. But these are a very good example, because if you have an ant colony next to, for example, your cacao tree, the ants will just get rid of these. So they're actually they're actually food for the ants. So this is just an example, because ants, they are like, they're hunters basically. So they hunt other animals. And a lot of the animals they hunt are actually pests for trees, like cacao trees or banana, or, yeah, as I said before. So a lot of people treat ants as a pest in their garden, but the ants are actually like the best thing you can have in your garden. They will hold off a lot of the pests that you want to get rid of. And for example, I know some farmers in Bali who actively introduced ant farms to their farms in order to get rid of, because a lot of those farms, they're very, very far on the countryside. And for them, it would actually be a big effort to bring pesticides. It would be a very big effort to spray the trees every day, especially if it's a hill and they have to almost climb to get there. So they said, why not just let the ants do the work? Like, they don't have to do anything. They just have to bring an ant colony there, or have an ant colony there, and they will just get rid of everything. They will get rid of, well, not everything, but a lot of the pests that we are dealing with. Another natural pesticide would be garlic. So a lot of the farmers, they grow garlic on their farm solely for the purpose of mixing it with aloe vera, for example, and some other herbs, which I only know the Balinese name and I forgot those. But they would mix all of that together and use that as a pesticide, which basically grows on the farm. And that comes back to permaculture, right? So if you want to use pesticide on your permaculture, you grow the pesticide on your permaculture. If you want to use fertilizer, you grow the fertilizer on your farm. And you try to blend it in a way where it really benefits all together.
That makes so much sense. Like thinking about the things that you're growing right around you, and that you just grow it there because you're going to have the components that you need to take care of whatever's growing on your farm. Um, just like that local mentality of like, yeah, just take from where you have. I when I traveled to Costa Rica last January, and we had the privilege of meeting the Bribri tribe there, and it was really really fascinating, and just the wisdom that they have, their relationship to the land. But the things that they shared is there's this python that lives in the jungle, and once a month it will come, and she's like, it's my house cleaner. It cleans my house. It eats all the rodents. And she's like, when I see it, I leave for a couple of hours and I come back and it's gone and my house is cleaned of all those. And another person who they weren't indigenous, but they were working on a cacao farm, and he's like, oh, those are warrior ants. Keep walking, step over, don't like, you don't want to interact with them. But he said, sometimes they come into your house, and when they come into your house, there's no fighting it. But you just
Mm-hmm.
leave, you go to the beach, you come back. They went into every nook and cranny, got all of the insects out of the small corners, and they left your house cleaner than when they came in. And I love the respect for, first of all, nature is a force of its own. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
step aside and let nature do its thing. And just the harmony and co-creation on that level of like, okay, these acknowledging that these insects have a role here, where I feel like, where we live, or where I live in New York and Long Island, there's just not enough for those animals and insects to live the natural life that they want. So
Yes.
they become, they find the sugar in your cabinets, and they find these things because it's what
Mm.
will sustain them. But I know for me, there's that longing to have that harmony and synergy come back into the society that I live in here. But I know it's not necessarily the most natural at the time. I just wanted to acknowledge those stories too.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I mean, that's the mentality of permaculture, right? To not, like you said, to not shelter out nature, to not shelter out anything, but to kind of integrate it in what you want. So to sometimes even make it serve you, like with the python, for example. If it comes around, you can may also as well clean your house, or the warrior ants, or yeah, the ants on the cacao farm. That's a very big aspect of it. In permaculture, it's called natural employees, I think, or nature's employees. There's a specific term for it that you actually use, that you actually try to restructure something. Like if your farm, for example, has a lot of, if you have a lot of chickens on your farm, you might as well not hold them in a cage, but hold them somewhere where they can fertilize the ground, or where they can pluck out the insects from where you want no insects, things like that. Or a python cleaning your house.
I'm curious about your journey too, because if there was something within your life that stimulated and that desired and want to study, um, uh, I, I have to look up the right word for it, but the Kreislaufswirtschaft, so the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
circulation.
Circular economy, I think, or circular.
Yeah. And if there was a pivotal moment for you that kind of broke that mentality of like, oh, wait, everything actually is interconnected, or how can I integrate that more?
And if I have to think about it, it probably a lot of people, probably everyone has been to a farmer's market before, right? And there's probably sometime in your life there's been a moment where you've seen a tomato that's been grown on a natural farm, and you've tried a real tomato that's been growing like in an organic, not even organic, but maybe just a small farm, and then you bite into it and you compare it to the tomato you get at the supermarket that's wrapped in plastic, and you're starting to think, this is what it actually tastes like. This is what we ended up with after years of industrial revolution and industrial farming and everything. And that's if I have to think about what really made me interested in that, it probably was a lot of these experiences, right? Like for example, when I went to Thailand and I tried fresh banana for the first time instead of the bananas in Austria that have been on a ship for a month or something. Um, in general, I think that's really what spiked my interest, because I noticed that if the supply isn't as big if there's not like a ton of food produced and 60% of it thrown away, but instead we just produce 20% of it, and the quality just goes beyond what we know. So if you go to a farmer's market and you grow fresh grown vegetable, so you buy fresh grown vegetables and you use these every day compared to the store bought vegetables every day, it will not just have a different flavor, texture, whatever. It will actually be a lot more beneficial for you. So I think this is really what inspired me, because yeah, there's there's like the organic movement, which is great, and there's more organic food. But to me, it was always like, if the whole food production, like for the entire world, would be like on these small scale farms, right? Yes, we wouldn't have like a supermarket with every single food available all time of the year. We would have a smaller selection to choose from, but it would be real food. Like the same for cacao. So if I compare, which is very unfortunate, but if I compare monoculture, industrial grown cacao powder, which is usually just a waste product of cacao butter production, so usually just a waste product of cosmetics industry. If I compare that to really organically grown cacao mass that doesn't need to be from Bali, because there's a ton from South America as well. They also have beautiful permaculture farms. If I compare those two things, it's not the same, right? It doesn't taste the same, doesn't feel the way. And ironically enough, if you go to a supermarket and you buy baking cacao, you can drink as much of it as you want. It will not have, you can drink half a kilogram, it will not have the same effect as maybe 20 grams of pure ceremonial cacao.
Yes. Growing up in Austria, it is a really deeply agricultural society, and it's a very small country, but I feel like they put such a focus and value on good food. And it's interesting, because now I've lived back in the States for now 10 years, and I visit Austria and Europe regularly. For those who know, I was traveling in Klagenfurt in the train station at the Billa, and the selection of tomatoes and vegetables is beyond anything you could find in a local grocery store in the United States. It's like better than all the organic shops. This is a small train station grocery store, and the selection there, it far exceeds anything that I can find on a daily basis here where I live. And yet I know so many people in Austria who are like, this is, but it's not it still. And I'm like, but it's so much better than what we have. I think that is really interesting, because I also know a lot of people who studied agriculture from Austria that are farmers working with the land, but now are bringing a new concept back to the traditional ways of agriculture in Austria.
Well, it's basically Klagenfurt is where I grew up, by the way. It's right back there. Funny coincidences, but yeah, it's something that I also experienced when I came back from not New Zealand but from Thailand. The markets in Austria, yes, I know what you're saying. Like because in Austria we still have this regional thing that most of the things you find at the supermarket, which are possible to cultivate in Austria at a certain time, they will be from Austria. So because Austria is also such a small country, it's already a pretty good example of how regional food production could look like. But to me, it's still like, as I said, there was always still a step further. So of course there's like, for example, if you go to the supermarket in Austria and there's a pepper that's grown in Spain and it's in Austria, it will taste different than a pepper grown in Austria. But again, it will taste different than a pepper grown on a small farm by maybe your neighbor or something like that, who really just has one or two pepper plants, right? So there's always this, probably also because you asked me what really got me into it, it's probably also this possibility to always make it a little bit better, to always improve it little by little, right? You can go from monoculturally farmed with pesticides sprayed, I don't know, let's say cacao, for example, to an organic cacao, which still is in monoculture, but at least now it's organic. Then you take away the monoculture part and you mix other plants in. Now it's a multiculture, and then you go even further and turn it into a permaculture. And I see a lot of positive development in any kind of agriculture, like Austria, for example, like you said, a lot of your friends are studying that, trying to get back to the traditional ways of farming. To me, it's always fascinating how when people say they want to go back to the traditional ways, when they say they want to improve the quality of their food, it's very often getting back to simpler practices, to a much easier way of cultivating it. Like take Bali, for example, like having a monoculture there is very hard work. You need to constantly kill everything that's growing. You need to constantly plow it down. You need to fertilize the trees because there's no natural fertilizer. For the Balinese farmers, they're like, well, we want to do permaculture because we don't need to do anything. We just let the jungle grow. Every now and then we harvest whatever is there to harvest. Every now and then maybe we cut back a little bit of the leaves, but it's so much easier. And I think agriculture here also can be so much easier because if you have living soil, if you don't spray your farmland with pesticides and whatever, you don't need to repair the soil, right? Because the soil will always be active. It will always be living. It will always have enough nutrients. You don't need to put a lot of fertilizer on there. So yeah, from my perspective, very often going the next step, going like to produce higher quality foods is actually just going back a few steps,
Yeah.
going back
Oh,
in
that's
time, so to
so,
say.
yeah, that's so fascinating. I love that it's actually simpler. Monocropping is actually harder to sustain. And also, who came to mind is Victor Schauberger. He worked with water and the natural structure of water and how water flows, and
Hmm.
just working. And he studied the currents of water and how they flow in rivers and how water supports the forest growth, and how he was trying to study. And I think he actually did it maybe in Graz, to place boulders in the specific space so that it would neutralize flooding. He was studying the currents of nature and placing it in certain ways where there was the wildlife wouldn't be affected by flooding, and the people and the land would be preserved. Just using nature, what's there, and just the power of seeing what's actually flowing, what's already working, and amplifying that. And it's usually simpler than building a huge dam.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same approach, 100%. Yeah.
I'm curious about the production of your cacao as well. So we've talked about the farm where it's come from, and once you get the beans, what happens?
So you have the so you have two types of cacao usually, because the beans of the cacao, they're only the core of the fruit of the cacao. So when we think about the cacao fruit, what a lot of people think about is this pod, which is like a very, very big bean that comes in all different colors. It's very beautiful actually. They can be like red, green, all sorts, and they have very beautiful patterns on them. Um, Inside these pods, we have the flesh of the fruit, and as I said, in the flesh, you have the seed, and only the seed is what we use for cacao. So there's two approaches to getting your ceremonial cacao, to getting your cacao nibs. Is one of them is to just take out the seeds of the flesh of the fruit, roasting those seeds, well, first drying those seeds, then roasting those seeds, and then grinding what you've roasted there. That's one approach that's a little bit faster. The other approach would be to ferment the cacao. So that approach is to take the flesh, the fruit flesh, and the beans, basically the whole pulp that's within this pot, and ferment that for certain time, depending on where you're doing it. It can be 5 days, it can be 17 days. It really depends on the climate and the conditions around it. And after fermentation, the beans have sort of the same flavor, the same look as a roasted cacao bean. And these beans, they still have the skin of the bean. And the skin, again, you can take off by two different ways. You can roast the beans so the skin falls off, or you can also peel it by hand. The idea of fermenting it and peeling it by hand is that it's never heated above 42, 48 degrees, again, depending on where you're doing it, to conserve a lot of nutrients. But whichever way you go, if you go with roasting, if you go with fermenting, if you go with hand peeling, what you're left with is the inside of the cacao bean, which is called cacao nibs, or which, well, is sold as cacao nibs. If you've had cacao nibs before, it's like little hard pieces of Yeah, it feels like it's chocolate pieces, but really it's just pieces of the seed of the cacao. And how you get there, again, you can do it with roasting, you can do it with fermenting, but these nibs are the base of every cacao. So if we would grind these nibs very, very fine, and I mean very, very fine, sometimes they take days to grind them, and turn them into a liquor just by grinding them very, very fine, this liquor is ceremonial cacao. This paste that we're grinding is ceremonial cacao. If instead of grinding, we press it, so we take those nibs and we really press it with a lot of pressure, we turn them into a powder, because what the pressing does is it removes the butter, it removes the fat. So if we press the nibs, we get the butter on one side and we get cacao powder on the other side. And as I said before, very often the cacao powder you find in supermarkets is just a waste product, because cacao butter is what's actually valuable. Cacao butter is what's used in a lot of cosmetic products, can also be used for cooking, but the major market for cacao butter is still remains to this day cosmetic industry. But yeah, in general, that's the way. So from the bean to the ceremonial cacao, there's actually not much changing the bean. It's more of the process of curing it. So whether you're roasting it, whether you're fermenting it, whether you're grinding it very, very fine, or whether you're pressing it. But overall, it's just the beans. I mean, you can also just eat the raw beans. So what's very delicious actually is the flesh of the cacao fruit. Unfortunately, you cannot get that easily, because it doesn't stay fresh that long. But you've probably tried it before. It's really, really delicious, especially if it's a very ripe cacao pot.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing like just opening up the
Meat
fruit and
is like
tasting
a
that.
blend of cherry and apple somehow. So, but with the
Yeah,
structure of lychee somehow, it's very, very unique.
it is. Do the farmers in Bali produce the Cao Bali cacao, or do you have the beans imported to Austria and work with the cacao yourself?
No, we actually work together with a company in Bali. They're called Ubud Raw. If you've been to Bali, you've probably seen them. They have 2 or 3 shops where they serve ceremonial cacao, ceremonial shots. They have a little factory. I guess we could call it factory, but it's all handmade, of course. In Ubud, or a little bit outside of Ubud. And yeah, for the Balinese beans, of course, we get them directly from Bali, from Jembrana, which is a little bit west of Bali. And we produce the ceremonial cacao, so we use the beans directly there. As I said before, for us, we also use beans from other permaculture farms. So, for example, one from Kalimantan, which is north of Bali, one from Papua New Guinea, and one from Sulawesi. Well, not one farm, but there's a few farms there, so like small-scale farms. And for those, we ship the beans from those neighboring islands also to Bali to produce it all in the same factory again. But that's basically so. Very often those farmers, especially if it's very small farmers, so some of them only have like 20, 30 trees at most, they don't have all the equipment, they don't have the facility to even ferment the beans. If they ferment the beans, they don't have the facilities to grind the beans, because that's a very, very hard process. So very often they only sell either wet beans, or they would sell us the dried or fermented beans. But the production always happens in Ubud, which is also quite nice, because, Ubud is like the spiritual center of Bali, so to say. And they always, the Balinese people always do a little ceremony. They always do their blessing before each workday. So to me, that gives a little bit more character to it as well.
Yeah, I came across your cacao for the first time last year in Vienna and had the privilege of drinking it, and it was nothing like I had ever tasted before, because up until then I'd only tasted South American cacao or African cacao. So seeing the Balinese, I was like, whoa, what is this? And the energy of it was just like, ooh, very, very magical. For me, it had this very magical and very sweet, like not taste wise sweet, but just this very sweet, kind, like loving energy. And I savored that. Like I stretch out. I'm curious about what your favorite thing or what you want. or wish people really knew about cacao?
And that's a good one. What I really wish people knew about cacao, well, what instantly comes to my mind is the two reasons I'm working with cacao is one, all of the nutritious value, which I've already tried to explain, but there's so much more. Like there's actually 300 active ingredients in cacao, so more than 300. So the nutritious value is definitely one part because cacao can help you with a lot of deficiency. First of all, of course, magnesium deficiency. Um, the other thing I really would like people to know is about effects of cacao because, for example, I have two people now already that I'm working with. They're therapists and they're incorporating cacao, ceremonial cacao within their client sessions. So within the therapy sessions with their clients, which everybody who's had cacao before can probably see how a cup of ceremonial cacao could be beneficial for any kind of therapeutic setting. What I'd like people to know more about would be also the effect of cacao, because for a lot of people, they're not aware of possible benefits cacao can have, not just, again, from the nutritious perspective, but also from the mental perspective, from their psyche's perspective. Like, it's not without reason that people used to say, if you're sad, you should eat chocolate, or chocolate will always cheer up your mind, or, if you're, I don't know, in a bad point in your life, like sometimes your friend would offer you chocolate. There's a reason for that, even though we forgot about it. And I think that cacao can help a lot of people in well, different kinds of situations, really. It can help you just brighten up your day. And it's not just the cacao, it's also the cacao ceremony, because as I said before, cacao is kind of a gateway into working, into spiritual work, into working with yourself. It can be a gentle push into a direction about more self-awareness. In general, I'd like people to know a little bit more about what cacao actually is, because I think people who know ceremonial cacao like I do, if everybody would know the same things I do, I wouldn't want to spread anything because everybody would be aware of the benefits. But I think not many people are aware of both these sides of the nutritious value as well as the, how shall I say, not therapeutic, but let's call it spiritual value.
Yeah. I like that word. um, I with I love that answer, and thank you for sharing that. Um, the one of the teachers that I had learning about cacao, they said that the Mayans believe that it is not only a food for your body, but it's also a food for your spirit, and it's one of the few foods that actually nourishes your spirit as well. And I always thought that was really beautiful. Of like, yeah, we're not only eating for. Usually, we think we're like eating for our mind, we're eating for our body to like nourish our body, or we're eating certain foods like that are high in omega fatty acids to get optimal brain function. But rarely have I actually even thought about it before this of eating for our spirit, like eating for the energy that lives beyond this vessel that we're in. And yeah, so I
Good
love that
part. It's a
share.
very, very good part, actually. Yeah. Thinking about it that way. I mean, it's called food of the gods for a reason, I assume.
I was thinking about the Balinese culture and the spiritual aspects and the gods that the Balinese cultures work with and believe in, and how that influences your cacao or what your relationship is to that spiritual aspect, and how the prayer that you mentioned that is prayed over your cacao.
So I'm not that familiar with all of Balinese religion because there's a lot. They have a lot of gods.
Oh yeah.
I know the major ones like Barong, of course, which is I think the most famous one. If anybody knows any Balinese gods, they probably know Barong. That's like and it has almost like a demon face, but it's a very, very popular. We see him everywhere. Then, of course, they have some Buddhist gods. They have some Hinduist gods. They have a lot. It's called Island of the Gods for a reason. But the little prayers they're doing every day. So if you walk the streets of Bali every morning, every single morning, you will see a lot of little offerings. So if you've been there before, they have these little banana leaf offerings. It usually contains like little crackers, flowers, sometimes cigarettes, and incense, always incense. So that's a very beautiful thing because they do it every single morning, and different natives have told me different reasons why they do it. Some say that it's because they want to be grateful for another day. They want to honor the God who gave them this day, or they want to honor the God of this day. They all have a somewhat different approach to it, but what it all has in common is that it is a ritual of gratitude. And that's one thing that really for me translates to the cacao as well, because I think it's one thing to grow food for other people, one thing to grow cacao or any food. It's another thing to really be grateful to doing it and to have this attitude towards it, that you're thankful for being able to cultivate this, that you're thankful for being able to work with this, thankful for the earth for providing this to you. And since they have this huge connection to nature, to the spiritual realm, of course, the farmers are very, very thankful for the god or earth that's giving them these fruits. They're always praying that they're giving them, of course, bigger fruits. But the rituals are basically gratitude rituals. So they're thankful for the land, they're thankful for whoever they think provides them with the fruits. And of course, aside from these daily rituals, there's also like the ceremonies which they hold on the farms as well, because that's what I said in the very beginning. In Bali, everybody thinks everything is one. So if they have a national holiday and they are a cacao farmer, they will spend the national holiday, or they will include the cacao trees into their national holidays, into their prayer, because it's part of their life and they don't see it as work. Okay, that's different from me. Like, take it for example, here in Western countries, nobody would on Christmas go to work and give their, I don't know, their desk a present or something like that. But that's basically the concept we're working with, right? They don't see it as work, they see it as part of themselves. So in that way, cacao has a very, very deep connection to the people, because for them, it's not just a job, it's part of them and takes part in their daily rituals, and thankful for it.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. I want to live that. That's so cool.
Yeah, right, me
I'm
too.
I'm curious about your favorite practices and rituals for yourself with cacao, whether it's by yourself or in a group, if you have any practices that you wish to share.
So I do practice cacao ceremonies every now and then, but I've noticed that the more I got into it, the more I got into working with cacaos. I usually do cacao ceremonies whenever one of my friends or affiliates holds a cacao ceremony. I would usually join them. But for me personally, I drink cacao every day, of course. um, my ceremony is not as much as a cacao ceremony. It's more as much as a little meditation, so to say, to take a little bit of the stress out of your day, to take a little bit of the speed out of my day, to just really focus on only preparing cacao, only being in the moment of preparing the cacao, only being in the moment of drinking the cacao. And very often, as you said before, like, cacao is my breakfast. So very often, that would be the first thing I consume in the morning, like a ceremonial cacao. And interestingly enough, very often that is sufficient for, I don't know, till afternoon, because dipping back into that nutritious value, cacao really has a lot of these fats that are very beneficial, that saturate you, that, yeah, you don't really have a craving for any other nutrition, which again speaks for me, speaks for the fact that cacao has this dense nutrition packed into it. But my personal ceremony usually looks like this. Yeah. So if I have a ceremonial cacao in the morning, that would turn into a morning ritual, that would turn into the ritual of preparing the cacao, that would turn into the ritual of mindfully consuming it, usually in nature if I have the possibility of doing so. And if I know that I have a ceremony that day, I wouldn't do that, but I would be very, very mindful at the cacao ceremony. But again, for me personally, I'm somewhere in between. I don't do a lot of ceremony around cacao, but for me, the ceremony is not about having a handpan and doing a lot of mantras, singing, and doing like a whole ceremony before drinking the cacao. But for me, preparing the cacao is the ceremony, drinking the cacao is the ceremony, and of course also actively listening to my body responding to the cacao is the ceremony. That's why I always say cacao ceremony can be as simple as just mixing a ceremonial cacao in the morning for 5 minutes and then drinking it for 5 minutes and then go on with your day. It can also be a cacao ceremony if it's done mindful.
I really enjoy that. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners are taking notes and will integrate these practices into their lives. It reminds me from the very little that I know of tea ceremony, of the presence that we bring to the plants that we're about to bring into our body, which is, I feel like it's pretty wild that we're constantly engaging, putting things into our body, and then taking the conscious time to really be present with, okay, I am preparing this fruit. It came from this place, cultivated by these people. It has this nutrients, and I'm going to bring communion and union within me so that it can nourish my body. And a really, really powerful practice. So thank you for sharing that with us and allowing us to deepen with that. Part of what I've started on this podcast is a blessing cycle. So I am asking my guests, so I'm asking you if you have a blessing or a wish for the next guest. And I have a wish from the guest I spoke to last, and she says,
Wonderful. Well, my message for this next person gonna be, let's unite, let's work together, let's share our life experience with cacao, and enrich each other, and let's love each other. Let's meet in this way or another way. And let's also meet our cacaos together. So let's all the masters of cacao from different beautiful lands come together.
love that. I will pass that message along. I'm a cacao who lives in India. I will forward her your information so that that thread can be woven together. And I ask you if you have a blessing or a wish for our next guest, and I can pass that along on our next conversation.
That's lovely what she said. Thank you very much for transporting that to me.
She is awesome. She's a very, very, very cool person.
I can imagine. So what I would like to pass on, there's always something I'd like to suggest to people who come to ceremonies. I don't actively hold cacao ceremonies, but I help my facilitators to help them, and I support them, and sometimes I say a few things. And what's always on my mind, that's the first thing that came to my mind, is that, well, cacao is a heart opener, right? So it opens everybody's heart. And for me, the mission of cacao is just to go out there and open everybody's heart. And I think that communication, that whatever we do, whatever we say to other people, whatever we actively pursue, also the things we do, cacao can really help us to do those things from the heart. Because very often, especially like even right now, if we're holding this podcast, if you wouldn't have done this little introduction in the beginning, I wouldn't have thought about just speaking from the heart. I probably would have thought about what am I going to say, how am I going to phrase it. And I think that's something for maybe for the next person, but I assume if they work with cacao, they already know how to speak from the heart. But that's something in general that I would like to pass on to keep that in mind, that cacao on the one hand can help us to really get to that place, but even without cacao, it's always something that's accessible, because you always think about how you're going to phrase something, what you're going to do, how you're going to kind of go with your work, whatever. It's a lot easier if you just do it from the intention coming from your heart, so without any, should I say, overthinking it. This is the concept, or yeah, it's not the concept, but the idea that I always give people during a cacao ceremony, that if they hold the ceremony, if they really go into themselves, if they go there with an intention and they feel like they need to, I don't know, meditate over something, don't do it too much from your head, but also try to really let go, because it's the simplest thing in the world to just open your heart and do things from your heart, speak from your heart. So yeah, I'd like to pass that advice, so to speak.
I will pass that along. Thank you for that wisdom. And thank you for this time together. I just want to see if there's anything else you'd like to share before we close our time together.
I think I shared everything I wanted to share. Actually, your questions were very, very spot on to everything I wanted to say. So thank you very much for that.
It was the co-creation, the energy that was there. It's what's ripe. So I'd love to take this time, just as we opened the space together, to close in a good way together. And I love to place my hands on my heart and my belly and just feel that connection to my body as we begin to come back into our center, sensing everything that we spoke about, all the new stories, the ideas, the information, the wisdom, feeling that all percolating in our mind, activating in our heart, allowing ourselves to connect down and root this wisdom down into the heart of the earth, feeling our spine once again elongating up, reaching up to the heart of the sky, and feeling ourselves as that pillar of wisdom, of inspiration, of connection, and feeling how our energy helps and supports our community, our families, and how our families support us, seeing our little local communities as this permaculture, and allowing what was spoken today to be integrated into our lives with ease and joy and grace, as we give thanks to the heart of cacao. We give thanks to the heart of the earth. We give thanks to the heart of the sky. We give thanks to the heart of the waters. We give thanks to the heart of the fires. And we give thanks to the heart of the air. We give thanks to the four winds that we breathe and the four directions that hold us. Thanking the north, thanking the south, thanking the east, and thanking the west. Giving thanks to the heart of ether, and we give thanks to the heart of the void. We give thanks to all of the energies that support us in every single moment. And I love to end like this. It is done, it is done, it is done. And it is fun, it is fun, it is fun.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Conversations with Cacao podcast. I hope you enjoyed these conversations, and if you find them inspiring and stimulating, please subscribe so you don't miss any other episodes. Next up, we have Anna Meshia, and she is a beautiful cacao ceremonialist who will be sharing her wisdom in the ways that she works with cacao and plant medicine. Stay tuned. And remember to nourish your roots, awaken your heart, embody your presence, and remember, you are pure magic.